let's take some time and look at the social world of the Bible. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, if we're to understand this book, which is an Eastern book, we need to be reminded of ourselves. I have to remind myself of this constantly when I'm reading, that this is an Eastern book. It's an Eastern book set in an Eastern context with an Eastern society and a people with a completely different culture and different social values than I have as a Westerner. And I've got to remind myself of that, because if I'm to understand what this is saying, the communication of this book, I have to understand the social setting and all of the other aspects of that society that are going on. So in the next couple teachings, I want to take some time and I want to kind of talk about that, because I think you'll find that this might be beneficial. It has been for me when I'm reading the Word. You know, there's a book that I had read previously, and it was called The Social World of Luke Acts, I believe. And in that, the writers, there was a series of writers, many theologians, or not, they weren't even theologians, they were more sociologists. And there was a statement in there which said something to the effect, when the reader and the writer share a different social system, then there's most likely going to be misunderstanding in what is being communicated. Let me say that one more time. When the reader and the writer share a different social system, then misunderstanding is going to most likely occur. Misunderstanding. In other words, if we don't understand the social setting and the way in which these people lived and thought, then we could read this and misunderstand what's actually being conveyed, what's being communicated. There was a situation I saw on the television a few weeks ago. There's an exercise coach, Jillian Michaels, I believe is her name. And I love watching Jillian. I love her passion, and I love what she does for people, helping them lose weight. But in this particular show, Jillian went and was spending 5 days with a group of Indians. They were American Indians, I think Apache or Cheyenne. And they were having problems with obesity. And when Jillian got there, one of the things that she did is, in a large tribal gathering where they were all celebrating, she took some food and she actually threw it away. The result was it created a tremendous offense amongst the Indians, because in their society, food is holy and you don't dishonor it by throwing it away. It was a complete set of social values which Jillian had no understanding. And the end result, it worked out fine, but they had to communicate, and they had to communicate the difference in social values of what was going on. So too, when we read the Bible, there absolutely is a different set of social values that's going on. One, for instance, I'm an individual living in the United States of America. I'm considered Western. This book is an Eastern book. In my society, there's a lot of emphasis placed on individualism. You know, the strong individual, the John Wayne. We create identity through self. In fact, we place a lot of emphasis on individual self. That dynamic did not exist in this book. In this book, the emphasis was on the clan, the group. You know, it really wasn't important what I as an individual wanted to do. What was important was the group. Group identity. That's a whole different mindset. Nomadic tribes that traveled, and they needed to live that way for the survivability of that group. You know, for me to say, well, I want to go do my own thing, I want to pursue my dream, they'd look at you like you're nuts. But yet when I read this book, I'm bringing into it a Western perspective that just doesn't exist in a lot of places. And I'm trying to take things in Proverbs and Psalms and different lessons out of stories, and I'm relating to it as a Westerner, which is all I can do. But I have to constantly remind myself, that's not the mindset that they had. You know, we place a lot of emphasis on the rights of the individual. Their emphasis was on protecting society, protecting the group, the good of the group. They frowned on personal promotion, personal, you know, if one person started to excel out of the group, they frowned on that. We elevate that. You know, we look at one person who's the underdog, and when they, you know, become the victor, we elevate that. They didn't necessarily do that because that wasn't good for, you know, when the emphasis is upon group. You don't put emphasis upon single individuals. So this has a direct bearing on how we understand. We place a lot of emphasis on materialism, material goods, and on personal comfort. They didn't put emphasis on that. And the reason I'm mentioning these things, and in another teaching I want to go into some very more specifics, but the reason I'm mentioning this is I just want us as readers of the Bible to get more connected to the social world in which Jesus Christ lived, the things He did and why He did it and how He did it. And for us not to then all of a sudden be reading this book with this Western mindset and we're reading things into the text that just is not there. We're trying to make things that the Word of God just does not say, because it's an Eastern book written about Eastern people in an Eastern setting. And we as Westerners need to get our mind into their world. You know, there was also what we call an honor and a shame society. And that's something that in the Western world we really don't relate to. Now there are honor-shame societies in the world today. Many of the Mid-Eastern worlds, in Saudi Arabia and some of those areas, Pakistan, Afghanistan, you know, tribal clan areas, there's still a very strong honor-shame society system. You know, in Afghanistan, if someone, you know, one of those tribal warlords takes you in, you know, many times they will die before they turn you over to an enemy because it's their honor. It has nothing to do with you as their visitor. It's about them and their honor. But see, we many times we've lost that. We don't have that in the Western world. You know, there's guys today that, you know, are politicians, prominent people. We have sex scandals in the White House. We have things like that. Honor, shame, we don't even think about that. A guy in our Western world, you know, could have a rotten character and then turn around and do something else great, and oh, that's wonderful. Well, yeah, but he's a great guy. And you know, no, there was a whole different emphasis in their society. And then also in the Western world, we don't place as much emphasis on gender roles. You know, in fact, you know, I just heard this morning that, you know, in the workplace, men and women's pay is on parity in a lot of situations. Where there's disparity is when the woman has children and different things. But those gaps in a lot of the gender areas have been closed significantly. You want to step back in this world, we've got huge gender differences between men and women. And, you know, we read stories of Paul with Lydia out by the side of the river with a group of women where that, you know, men just did not approach women in those kinds of things. Or where Jesus sat down and began a conversation with a woman at the well. See, we need to understand that this is not just like I would walk up to someone in the mall. This is a huge thing. And when the more we understand their culture and their social world, the more that this book will open up to us and we'll get the true message God has.